It's time for the drive with Q on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. Now, here's Q.
Good afternoon, everyone. 4 o'clock straight up on the East Coast. It is indeed a Wednesday edition of The Drive, coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 102.9 FM studios. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Mi hermano Angel Martinez behind the glass, producing the show. 2 hours to play with. We'll take you up to 6 o'clock straight up on this 18th of September, 2024. Get in on the conversation. Don't forget the 727-858-6650. Bring something to the table. And we are brought to you by our good friends over at Zen Auto Concepts, for the love of cars, located in Stuart, Florida, specializing in ceramic coating and PPF. Zen Auto Concepts, the leader in high-end detailing and paint protection. And they are voted one of the best detailers in all of Florida. Check them out online, ZenAutoConcepts.com. They are located in Stuart, Florida. We got 2 hours to get it going on the drive. So a long drive down 95, as we like to say in the world of sports. A lot of stuff to dive into. A interesting, I guess you can say, potpourri, a mixed bag, if you will. In about 20 or so, Steve Gardner from USA Today will join us. We'll go heavy baseball with him. NFL, Sirianni doubling down, Eli a nomination for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Week 3 sneak peek look at the lines, and I'll give you some thoughts on that. Thursday Night Football, mañana, and kind of an interesting contest now because the Patriots aren't as bad as I believe they would be, but it'll be the Pats and it'll be the Jets. You got the fallout from Young, you got Miami in search of a quarterback, the Tua news, so we'll just dive into everything when it comes to that. Also, some little tidbits on the NBA, some news and notes. But interesting enough, with the baseball playoffs right around the corner, and I think if you don't follow baseball closely, say as much as, the next guy, the next fan, right? I think we're in store for a really interesting stretch run in baseball. I really do, especially in the NL, because you look at the season that the Philadelphia Phillies have had, right? I mean, the Philadelphia Phillies kind of been a mixed bag. They were hot, then they cooled off, then they just were really hot. Schwarber, Harper putting up monster numbers. I mean, Schwarber quietly putting together another brilliant campaign. Then you thought the Braves, even though they lose Acuna, would be right there. They've struggled. They've fallen back 10 back. Now, all of a sudden, the Mets, and we'll get into this with Steve Gardner in about 15 or so, backed by Francisco Lindor, are right there when you talk about the one of the two NL wildcard spots. San Diego finally putting it all together. I would not want to face them. I'm not so sure if the Milwaukee Brewers will be a tough matchup. And then you got the Dodgers in the West. And a couple of these teams, depending upon if you went win totals, the Phillies probably not going to hit it. The Dodgers not going to hit it. I thought, I thought some of these teams were going to win about 95 plus. And then you got some really bad teams, some really bad baseball in the NL. And then conversely, the same could be said in the AL. I mean, if you're a Baltimore Orioles fan right now, you had that division. It was right there for the take, and they've lost 7 out of 10. They're 4 back of the Yankees. The Yankees are going to win the AL East. Baltimore, they're out of it. Tampa's buried. Tampa had that historic start last year where they had about a 1.34 ERA with their starters. They have not been able to build upon it and bridge it into this year. Toronto, rebuilding. Chicago, one of the worst teams we've seen over the last 60-something years of baseball. Tigers, rebuilding. Kansas City, upstart. Cleveland, upstart. And then Seattle blows the AL West, and they fire their manager, and now the Houston Astros are well on their way to winning another AL West crown. And that's kind of the beauty of baseball, to be quite honest with you. And I think, and I've had this debate with Met fans who are very heated, very passionate when it comes to Francisco Lindor and the NL MVP race. And the argument, and I believe Ohtani is clearly the best player in baseball. But then you have to look at what Lindor has been able to do with the bat and the glove for the Mets, pretty much propelling them into the postseason. And then, of course, Ozuna, the DH with Atlanta. And again, if you're going to make a case for Ozuna, then that tells me Shohei Ohtani is clearly going to win the NL MVP. So we'll get into that in about 15 or so, baseball wise, with Steve Gardner. As far as the NFL and Eli Manning, as you guys know, I've always been a staunch supporter of number 10. Eli Manning is headlining first-time Hall of Fame nominees for class of 2025. Let me give you the list as it was sprouted out today. First-time candidates: offensive lineman Travis Frederick, Ron Khalil, Joe Staley. Running backs: Marshawn Lynch, Darren Sproles. Receiver: Demaryius Thomas. Tight ends: Vernon Davis, Delaney Walker. Defensive backs: Antoine Bethea, Aqib Talib. Earl Thomas is probably the guy that might get the nod. You also have some players that are coming back, consideration finalist a year ago. Antonio Gates, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. Torrey Holt, Reggie Wayne, we can make the case for and against. Willie Anderson, very good player. But listen, obviously Eli leads the charge here. And everyone will look at Eli's career, and this is where I constantly get hammered when you start to get into this topic of conversation with Eli Manning. Because there's two schools of thought. Eli Manning put up monster numbers in his career. Eli Manning, if you think about it, is arguably one of the best and most clutch playoff quarterbacks that we've ever seen. But he was also feast or famine come playoff time. The Giants were feast and famine. Now, they went on two remarkable runs. We know that. And he was part of those teams, obviously the catalyst to dethrone the Pats, not once, not twice, right? But twice, beating Tom Brady twice. It's always the interesting case because people will look at the wins and the losses. Then you got to look at the numbers. Then you say to yourself, well, was he a top 10? If you look statistically throughout the course of his career, always right there. You can make a case Eli Manning should have won the MVP in 2011. Everyone talks about the Giants defense. Look at the stats. I know every play, every game, every quarter of that season, as well as 2007. He carried that team. Okay? Comeback after comeback after comeback. And again, you think about it. You beat the Falcons, you go on the road, and who do you take care of? You take care of Aaron Rodgers, 15-1 Packers. Then you go on the road, and who do you take care of? A vaunted 49ers defense where he got sacked 7 times and still put up monster numbers, and then you beat the Pats again. So it's a case study of how you look at the quarterback position in the NFL, how we like to attach and tag names, and we always want to look at the wins-loss records when we're talking about these quarterbacks in the NFL. I believe, again, for my money, and again, I have to say this, being objective, I don't see how you don't put Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he's going to get there. He's going to get there. I mean, it's just a question of, is he going to get in this time around, or is he going to have to wait? But you can't dispute when you see, the thing is, when you talk about the Hall of Fame, or we like to talk about, when you look at the history of the NFL, here's the argument we always like to say. Can you make a case? Can you talk about the history of the NFL and not bring up X, Y, and Z? Well, can you tell the story of the NFL and not bring up Eli Manning? I don't think you can. I mean, he was basically the catalyst to dethroning the greatest team on paper, right? So I think you look at the stats, the numbers, the consistency, the toughness, never, ever missing a game. He should have been out for a long time in 2007. Should have missed about 4-6 weeks. 2011 played with the plantar fasciitis. So I think you can really make a case for Eli Manning, and there will be the case against him. Look at his record, 500 quarterback. Again, turnovers, this, that, the other thing. And also, he's getting in because his last name is Manning. Strip him of that, and is he getting in? I mean, look, Fair arguments, man. Fair arguments. But when you talk about leaders and you talk about passing yards and you talk about when these guys retired, I mean, Eli Manning just got bumped. I know, I think he's still top 10. I mean, but he threw for close to 58,000 yards. I mean, if Eli Manning doesn't get he's well over 60,000. And only 8 quarterbacks have thrown for 60,000 yards or more. Brady, Breeze, Manning, Peyton, Brett Favre, Big Ben, Rivers, Ryan, Marino. So if you're going to sit there and say you got to put Rivers in, Rivers never won anything. Eli gets in. If you're going to say you got to put Roethlisberger in, he was horrible in the one Super Bowl win. Eli gets in. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, folks. That's just how it is. But I feel as though that name will warrant not only a hot debate, but also to some extent criticisms, right? Criticisms, because you're always talking about, well, it's only a run here and there. It doesn't matter. They were historic runs. They were historic runs. And the fact that you beat Belichick and Brady not once, but twice, that's got to hold a little cachet. You never missed a game due to injury. That's got to hold a lot of cachet. The other NFL that I wanted to get into today, I guess you can say not really story, but just kind of rubbing me the wrong way, is Philadelphia Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni, who basically doubled down again today. Doubled down on his remarkably inept decisions that cost the Philadelphia Eagles during their choke job on Monday Night Football. Now, again, you missed yesterday's show, heated. A reminder, Eagles were driving down the field up 3 points late in the fourth quarter. Monday night, Falcons 10-yard line. Let's throw a little screen pass out in the flat to Saquon Barkley. Falls incomplete on 3rd and 3 with a $1:46 left. You don't keep the ball on the ground. You don't run out more clock against the Falcons that didn't have any timeouts. And then on 4th down, you elect to kick a field goal to put them up 21-15 instead of going for it again in the ice game, which backfired when Captain Kirk and Atlanta went 70 yards to score a touchdown and basically get out. I mean, it was an improbable win. So this is what Sirianni had to say. And you tell me if this is your head coach, tell me what you think. Quote, I was completely convicted that kicking the field goal there was the right decision based off of all my studies. Now I come back and I reevaluate it and I'm even more convicted, to be quite honest with you, because just everything that goes into that. That's when we get into this conversation of analytics and data, okay? And you got a owner in Jeffrey Lurie, and you're doubling down. I got to be honest. That's not going to sit well with him. And that's not even the nitpicky version of where I'm going with this. That's not even the nitpicky version on this Wednesday where I'm about to unload on this clown again. So after a just horrible loss, you would think the head coach, the leader of men, got to take the bullets, got to take the shrapnel, got to stand up there and own up to it. Put it on him. Put it on you. Speak to the team. Address the team, right? Because that's what good head coaches do. That's what Super Bowl winning caliber type of head coaches do in the NFL. They take the shrapnel. They take the bullets. They stand up there, right? They run towards the fire. They don't run away from the fire. And you address your team like a man. You address your team. Isn't that the key? Isn't that what we want to do? We want to get in there. We want to address the team. You know what? It's on me, guys. It's on me. It's absolutely on me. Got to put you in a better position. Got to be smarter. Got to coach you up. Still got to run the ball. Still got to stop the run. Got to tackle. Got to catch the ball. Got to make plays too, guys. But you know what? This is on me. Nope. Doesn't happen. Doesn't address his team. Nope. No. Jalen Hurts did. And that's great. Jalen Hurts addresses. Okay, fine. Does anyone else see a major problem with this? A major problem. You just have a meltdown of epic proportions on Monday night where you probably had the Falcons had a .0000000 like -1 chance of winning that game. Extremely unlikely they were going to win that football game. Beyond unlikely if you just ran the friggin' football. And the loss is clearly on you. It's clearly on you as head coach of leader of men. Yeah, players play. I get it. Coaches coach. Players make plays. Blah, blah, blah. Yada, yada, yada. And you still stand up there and you have the franchise quarterback address the team. You won't address the team. After a horrible loss, home opener, high expectations. If I'm a fan of that team and that's my head coach, I'm livid. With a loss like that, how does a head coach not address the team? I don't care if your last name's Sirianni or if it's Belichick or Coughlin or McCarthy or Walsh or Cowher or Landry or Lombard. How do you not address the team? That's embarrassing. That is embarrassing, man. And when you start to talk about, again, the analytics and what the chart suggested on 4th down, quote, my chart, what I say to do is to kick it. There's about 20 websites that you can punch in a number. Y'all can see that. But I base it off of what my studies have been and my conviction of my studies. Wow. So you realize to a lot of NFL owners, that's not a big deal. To Jeffrey Lurie, that's a big friggin' deal. And this is a really bad take by the head coach. And it's a really embarrassing thought by the head coach. I told you this prior to season. I said it in the offseason. When this team misses the playoffs, he is as good as gone. And they might make the playoffs. I would still get rid of this guy. I would still get rid. He just doesn't get it. And what you're doing now is, as you try to explain it even more, you're sounding foolish. It's almost as bad as when he was talking about planting the seed. You know? I mean, I remember I'm on the air 1450 sports betting radio. And I remember that cut because I had Bette Midler and the Rose playing in the friggin' background. I'm like, are you kidding me with this clown? Talking about the water, plants, seeding, mud, blooming flowers. Get the frig out of there with that nonsense. This guy's a knucklehead. There's no rationale. There's no justification in the world for that play calling the other night. And the fact that you're doubling down makes you even look foolish. What's wrong with saying, in hindsight, probably should have ran the football? That's on me. That's on me. I would actually I would respect you more. I would respect him more if he actually said, I need to overrule the OC. I need to step in and say, no. We brought in number 26. We have one of the best offensive lines in football. Go out and get me 3 yards and let's end this. Then take a knee and that's all she wrote. No. Let me double down. Okay. All right. Have fun with that in about 3 more months when you're hanging out being a Walmart greeter. Go ahead. Let me know how that works out for you. Let me know. All right. Cranking it up on a Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game, 20 past 4 o'clock hour. We'll take a quick timeout. We'll talk a little baseball on the other side. We'll also get some of your thoughts and your text messages on the call the other night for Sirianni. I mentioned Eli as well, 727-858-6650. MLB's Steve Gardner will join us. USA Today, great writer, Hall of Fame. We'll run through the gamut postseason, what teams might scare him a little bit, make him a little nervous. And also this debate, NL MVP. A lot of people now are starting to get a little saucy when it comes to Francisco Lindor. So we'll dive into that. Keep it locked in, just cranking it up on a Wednesday edition of The Drive right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous, as in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Call or text the show at 727-858-6650. Now, back to Q.
All right, 21 past 4 o'clock hour on the East Coast. We'll take you up to 6 straight up on a Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass producing the show, 727-858-6650. That'll get you involved into a sports talk. We'll open it up as well. Don't forget our 20 after portion of the show from our good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clements Bridge Road, offering you the best top dollar for your used sports equipment and more. Open 7 days a week. Check them out online, playitagainsports.com/Deptford. And I know they have some authentic old school baseball jerseys. And with that, we welcome in our good friend from USA Today, great baseball writer, Steve Gardner, also Hall of Fame voter. How are you, my friend? The stretch run, as we like to say.
I'll tell you what, man, this is the most exciting time of year, September, October, where, the contenders and the pretenders separate themselves. And I don't know if that has quite happened yet in Major League Baseball. So we have a lot of drama going for the last couple of weeks of the season.
Well, I was going to say, we know a couple things, right? We saw the Mariners fade, manager loses his job. I don't know what the hell's going on with your O's right now. They are fading fast,
Yeah.
right? And it's not like the Yankees are blowing anyone away. I want to get to the AL. I want to get to the AL East to kind of start things off, and then we'll pivot to the NL and the MVP debate, and of course the Philadelphia Phillies. But you look at this AL East right now. I mean, what troubles you the most about Baltimore?
I think starting pitching, number one, and number two, it's, they're not hitting the ball at all. I mean, this was a team that was leading the major leagues in early July in OPS and scoring and slugging and everything else. And they just can't hit these days. I mean, they're getting, obviously Blake Snell last night was fantastic and has been for quite some time now. But otherwise, I mean, they were playing the White Sox and teams that they should be beating to a pulp, and they were still having trouble scoring. And I think that's what's the most troubling. Yes, they have had some injuries, and it seems like they're going to get Ryan Mountcastle back, Jordan Westberg back as they get to the end of the regular season. So getting them back in the mix may help. But still, I worry, Adley Rutschman's in a huge slump, and that sort of thing just doesn't happen, doesn't correct itself overnight. And so that's what's concerning. It's pretty much everything. I mean, starting pitching, it's hitting, it's relief pitching, having made a major roster move today. So I think they're just looking for a spark anywhere they can get it, and just hoping that they can hold on until October gets here.
Yeah, interesting, because you see the season that Henderson had, and he was, again, we were having a debate. All right, you put him right there in the AL MVP, but then all of a sudden, Santander's had a monster season with 41 home runs. Again, the batting average as a whole collectively across the league we know, listen, if you can get to 255, you're having a pretty good season. They sit at 248 right now, batting 248. We've seen some bad averages across the board, but it's not like they don't have a pretty formidable lineup. But again, think about it, right? You drop 2 out of 3 to Detroit. They're 2 out of 3 to Boston. They got 2 out of 3 to Tampa, which I want to get into for a moment. Tampa Bay, they're an interesting team. Had a couple people already text in, Rays fans wondering why they're getting rid of all their players, it seems, year in and year out. They banked on their ERA, right? They had a historic, ridiculous run last year, first couple months of the season, with their starting pitching. I think they were hoping they were going to get those types of results early on this year. And let's be honest, I mean, they haven't. So when you look at Tampa Bay, would you say they're one of the most disappointing teams in the AL? Or if you really take a step back, you just say, well, they're just not that good.
I'll tell you, that was the way that I looked at this Tampa Bay team in the preseason. It's like, it seems like everybody just pencils them in because you can't figure out how they do it, but they manage to do it year in and year out. And but losing Glass now and all the guys from last year's team, Yandy Diaz just completely overachieving anything he'd done before in his career. Then they trade away Rosarena and it's one of those cases where Tampa Bay is just kind of in a reset mode at this point. And I think you could see it coming early on in the season when so many things had to go right the way that it did last year, and they didn't. And that's who we kind of thought the Rays were. And I don't think it's been, yes, it's disappointing to lose and not contend in the AL East, but I don't think you could have been, completely optimistic if you were a Rays fan when the Yankees are adding Juan Soto and the Orioles are adding Corbin Burns in the offseason and think that you're going to be able to keep up with them just because you have in the past.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, look around, right? A lot of these teams that are relying on small ball, try to manufacture runs, they can do it at times. And there are other teams that are also relying on, say, like the long ball. You look at the Boston Red Sox. I mean, they're going to have 3-4 players hit well over, 20 something odd home runs.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really watch them, again, it's not like they're stealing a ton of bases. It's not like they're getting premium pitching as well. And it's one of the reasons that they're pretty much a 500 team right now. I mean, I thought the AL, to be honest, I always figured it was going to be the Yankees or Baltimore, but I thought there was going to be a little resistance from, say, Toronto this year, a little more resistance from Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I did too, especially the Blue Jays. I thought, after knocking on the door, just getting into the playoffs, it seemed like, this was a team that was on the rise, and they just haven't been able to put it all together. And Bo Bichette being hurt, that hurts, a decent amount, but still, everybody else, with the exception of maybe Vlad Guerrero, has really not helped them, has not stepped up. And this is a team that really has to do some soul searching because Guerrero's going to come, going to have his contract come up. Bichette's going to have his come up, and they need to figure out where their core is going to be and what their long-term future is. That's going to be, there can be some big decisions up there at Rogers Center that need to be made.
Yeah, and it kind of leads me to the AL Central right now. Obviously, the Cleveland Guardians started to distance themselves. They're up 5 against Kansas City. Kansas City, if you took a flyer on them to win over 80 games, congratulations, right? 82 and 70. But again, you're struggling at the worst time. I mean, think about it. They've already dropped the first 2 against Detroit. I think they've dropped 4 of 6. But here's the one thing I like about the Royals.
Mm-hmm.
They've quietly kind of gone about their business. And, I don't know about you, but you talk about as steady as they are when it comes to being a veteran pro. Salvador Perez, I mean, he's arguably been the face of that franchise for well over a decade. They're getting a lot of production from Witt Jr. They're getting production from Garcia. They're getting production from I'm trying to think of the
pitching staff has been amazing too.
Yeah, and I was about to butcher his last name, but yes, the pitching this year, because Lugo's having a career year, right? And Waka's pitched well.
Waka's been fantastic. Both, they went out and signed those guys like right as the offseason began. They were among the first teams to move. And I know people were saying, the Royals, what are they doing? They were a 100-loss team last year.
Yep.
And it has been amazing, the turnaround that they've been able to put together.
Yeah, just to kind of give you a little perspective. I mean, Cleveland was sitting at 77.5, the Twins at 85.5, and I'll pull up the Royals in a moment. But I mean, they plus 2,000 to win the division. I mean, think about that for a moment. I don't have the win total right in front of me, but plus 2,000 to win a division, which is unheard of. I mean, if you look at the AL over the last several years, it's pretty much has been Cleveland and Minnesota. Obviously, I'm trying to go back. What year was it? I can't since 2014. Who did Detroit win in 2014? But point being,
the Royals went to the World Series in 14 and 15.
14 and 15, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the Tigers with
Correct.
Verlander and all those guys.
There you go.
Probably before that.
Yeah, there you go.
But,
So it's point being is I don't think a lot of people had a lot of stock or a lot of equity was built in what Kansas City, and they're right there in the wild card. They're literally right there in the wild card. That's what makes it so compelling, whether it's the AL or the NL. I mean, these wild card races, if you check out what's going on right now, Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota, Detroit, Seattle, even though they're 3 back, Boston's breathing a little bit 5 back, but I'll tell you, it would be neat to see Kansas City get into the playoffs because that's a good market for baseball.
Yeah, and it's a great story. I would love to see, as you mentioned, Salvador Perez get another chance on the big stage. Bobby Witt Jr. in October to see how he performs under the bright lights. That would be tremendous fun. So yeah, I think, and right now, they're a game and a half ahead of Minnesota in second place, and who knows if the Orioles start to continue to collapse. Maybe the Royals pass them for the first wild card spot. So they're playing great ball right now, and it's fun to see because all of the history with that franchise, and not really a whole lot to show since that World Series title.
That's right. When they took care of the Mets, who we'll get into in a moment. 4:32 on the East Coast, a Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass. Steve Gardner, kind enough to join us at Steve A. Gardner on X, baseball writer, reporter, senior fantasy editor, USA Today Sports Hall of Fame vote as well. All right, DNL. Let's get into this. So you've got Ozuna, a DH, you got Ohtani, a DH, and then you got Lindor, the shortstop. I think the only trophy he gets this year is a Gold Glove, but he's literally been carrying the New York Mets over the last month plus. I mean, we know that they've got a absolutely monster series coming up against their arch rival in the NL East in the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, I know he was out of the lineup last night, out of the lineup, it looks like tonight against the Nationals with his back. They need him, but can you make a case for Francisco Lindor to win the NL MVP? Notwithstanding the monster numbers that Ohtani has put up, make a case for Lindor.
Okay. When you talk about most valuable, you talk about contributions not only on offense, but also on defense, base running, and you can include clubhouse and impact on the team in other ways, in the intangibles. And sports writers for many, many years have used that as a way to differentiate between players if they're very close. I'll tell you what, though, just from a strict numbers point of view, Ohtani certainly has the advantage with the home runs and the stolen bases and everything that he's doing there. But again, if he's DHing, he's not playing in the field, and Lindor is coming up, 30-30 season for himself. It's not 50-50, but it's still pretty darn good. Plus playing superb defense. And, that can't be overlooked, how much of an advantage he gives the Mets at a premium position. And I know you hate to bring up wins above replacement, Rich, but when you talk about the entire contribution, and that's what WAR measures, offense, defense, base running, everything, Francisco Lindor actually has a higher WAR than Shohei Ohtani because of that benefit that he provides on defense, and kind of the war penalty that is imposed on Shohei Ohtani for not playing any defense and just going up and batting 4 or 5 times in a game. So yes, you can absolutely make a case for Francisco Lindor. I don't know that I would, just because Ohtani has also been valuable in the wake of injuries to Mookie Betts and Max Muncy and all of those guys. He's been a constant presence in that Dodger lineup, moving his spot in the batting order,
Yep.
and adapting to give them, to make them as good as they have been. But in terms of contributions, I think it's pretty darn close between Lindor and Ohtani.
So, yeah, you know where I'm at with the whole war, and I get it. I mean, I'm not saying it's a subjective. I'm not, but Ohtani, he's going to have 50 home runs. He's going to steal 50 bases. He's probably going to bat 290 something. He's over 100 ribbies, right? So if you look at the categories, first, second, eighth, respectively, forget about Ozuna because the Braves are fading. And then you look at Lindor, and you're right. You do have to factor in the glove, the defense, batting 271, 86 ribbies, 27 stolen bases, 31 home runs. So the power is starting to become alive a little bit and more legit right now. Now, do you give him more of a backing knowing that, say, Pete Alonso has struggled this year for the Mets, whereas you look at the Dodgers and you're like, well, wait a second. They've got Hernandez, they got Freeman, they got Smith, they got Betts. I mean, they've got a stacked lineup. I guess the question is, if you take Ohtani out of that lineup, are the Dodgers a 90-plus win team?
That is a fantastic question. And, it's one that we've debated in many different forms in previous years. Does the quality of a player's teammates make him less valuable, or because he's got a lot of good teammates and they win a lot more than anybody else,
Right.
is he more valuable? It's a question I don't know.
Or the flip side, if they're struggling and you have to pick them up, like Alonso's had a down year.
Yeah, and so I think with those, it's so much of an equal argument. Does a player's teammates matter? Do a player's teammates matter in terms of his value to the team? And I don't know where I come down on that. I mean, you look at, I go back to the Mike Trout, Miguel Cabrera MVP situation. Miguel Cabrera won the Triple Crown and was on a great team.
Yep.
And Mike Trout was just there toiling, doing the best he could with a terrible team. Who's more valuable? And we had people in both camps. And I think that's, if there's a little bit of a parallel, we kind of have that, except for the fact that, Francisco Lindor has the Mets now in playoff competition. If it were, a couple months ago, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation, but the Mets are a playoff team, are playing like a playoff team right now. And Francisco Lindor is the main reason why. So I think he certainly deserves credit for that.
Yeah. I mean, how you could have made a case from Mike Trout in 2015 and Donaldson won it. I mean, Mike Trout's one of those cases where it's like Michael Jordan. Pretty much he can win in every single season, but let's give it to somebody else. So right now, if you had your vote right now, Steve Gardner, who's MVP of the NL?
I think it's Ohtani, but it's so close. Yeah. And what could happen over the last couple of weeks could change my mind as well. I think this is maybe the toughest MVP vote that we've seen for a decade or more.
Wow. Interesting enough, let's just say he's out for the series against the Phillies and they get swept. That only strengthens his case.
That's right. That's right. How can you be a better MVP candidate when your team gets swept and
Correct.
Is on the borderline of making the playoffs or not? It's circular reasoning.
When you look at the NL, this is just me. I had the Dodgers going to the World Series. I believe I had the Dodgers winning it all. I mean, I can't believe I forgot my prediction. It's just April so long ago, and I'm not trying to waver or flip-flop. I just think they have the most stacked lineup. The pitching is there. They're, a playoff tested team. They know how to win. They've had some bad disappointments, but they know, kind of like Houston, right? I mean, you give Houston any type of life and they get in. There's a reason they've gone to all these ALCSs. With that being said, I feel like Milwaukee is a nice story out of the Central But I
Mhm.
don't feel as though the Milwaukee Brewers can beat, say, the Phillies or the Dodgers. I don't think they stack up well against them.
No, I don't think so either. And the Brewers are a fantastic story this season. Doing everything that they're doing without really their best player in Christian Yelich,
That's
who
right.
who is not going to be there even for the postseason or anything. Um, it's a fantastic story, and maybe if the Brewers had Yelich, it could be very interesting in the postseason. But I don't see them being able to hang with any of the heavyweights in the National League, and yeah, it certainly looks like it's going to come down to a Phillies Dodgers kind of thing. And like you, Rich, before the season, I thought the Dodgers were going to be the slam dunk National League pennant winner. When you add Otani and Yamamoto, and to a team that was already so very, very good. Glass now, even. But yet, now Glass now is not going to be a part of that. Yamamoto is just now coming back. Who knows how much he's going to play? Clayton Kershaw, can't count on him. So, this Dodger team is kind of a shell of what we thought they could be, which opens things up for the Phillies to come in there with their nice 1-2 punch on the mound, and an MVP of their own in Bryce Harper. That I think is the big showdown that baseball fans are excited about and are watching for in the NLCS.
Just to housekeep on the Brewers, man, they got a star in that second baseman, that kid Terang.
Yeah,
I mean, and they steal bases. They steal bases, right? They play small ball. They manufacture runs. I think the kid's got 44, 45 stolen bases, like 70 in 2 years since he came into the majors. All right, you mentioned the Phillies. And again, these parts, everyone with the Red October, here we go. Harper kind of quietly, not a Harper-esque type of season, right? Schwarber, big bat, but you're looking at some of the young players that they've called up, making contributions, wondering, all right, are they going to be on the postseason roster? Again, for me, it's pretty simple with the Phillies. And it's just, you've got Castellanos, you've got Bohm, you've got Schwarber, you've got Harper, you've got Turn. These guys collectively
hmm
have to hit in the postseason. There's just, if they're a buck 82, they're not going to go any far, right? Because they picked the worst time for their offense and their bats to go quiet. And then conversely, you mentioned the staff. Wheeler's dominant. You and I have gone back and forth with the
Oh
Nola.
yeah,
What are you going to?
right.
I mean, listen, if they have to rely on Walker, I would be nervous as hell. I mean, this guy has struggled
Yeah,
mightily this year. And again, everyone's going to sit there and say, oh, well, what about the runs? This guy's giving up runs like left and right. I think he gets to start against the Mets tomorrow. I'd have to double check, but he hasn't won a start since early May. So
yeah.
they've got some chinks in the armor, so to speak. But I also believe, to your point, it will be them and the Dodgers in the NLCS. Do you believe the Phillies are built to win it all this season?
I think they could. I certainly think they could. And obviously, when you get to October, um, players can get hot, or they can get go into a slump. But I mean, there's so many veteran players on this team. You probably will not see every single one of them go into a slump. There will be somebody to carry them when they need it. We've seen this in the postseason, a couple of years running now. Um, didn't get as far as they wanted to last year, but we're still pretty darn close. And to get into the postseason, I think this team does have that kind of experience and talent to be able to make it all the way. And you mentioned too in the pitching staff, even if they don't, Taiwan Walker could be a long man in the bullpen in the postseason. Ranger Suarez had such a great start to the season. I could see him finding something, in October. Christopher Sanchez has been good for most of
Mm.
the year. So, I mean, there's a solid base right there to get you through, the early rounds and everything. And the bullpen, Estevez has been good for them. Has been a very, very positive addition to bolster that bullpen and give it some structure. So I like the depth that they have there. You've got to have depth in the bullpen in the postseason. We've seen that before. So yeah, I think you can't really point to a single specific weakness that could be a fatal one for this Phillies team because they have so many different people that can step up and seemingly carry the team if needed.
Who's their biggest threat in the NL?
You mean beside the Dodgers?
Well, I mean, we know it's the Dodgers, but if the Dodgers, who we've seen there, and let me rephrase that. Yes, we
Okay.
see the Dodgers have some bad losses in the playoffs. So let's just say the Dodgers get bounced and they're not in the
Oh,
NLCS. So
okay. All right.
let me hedge. I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, that's all right.
Who would be their second biggest threat? I mean, would you want to see the Mets? Would you want to see the Padres? The Diamondbacks?
The Padres are interesting to me because, again, this is a team that, no Juan Soto. There's so many guys that they just retooled the entire roster almost over the offseason. But Dylan Cease has been pitching like an ace. And they're getting Joe Musgrove back, getting Yu Darvish back. That makes them very interesting. And Michael King has had a fantastic second half of the season, certainly maybe second 2/3 of the season. So that makes them a very interesting team. And then AJ Preller at the deadline bolstered their bullpen. So to me, the Padres seem like a very dangerous team that if it's not going to be Philly and the Dodgers, these guys can make some noise and really scare some teams because just the talent level they have and the fact that Fernando Tatis Jr. is back. After missing a whole lot of time, he's back in that lineup, and now all of a sudden it looks a lot different when you have Arias and then Tatis and Machado and Jurickson Profar, who's had a fantastic year, and Jackson Merrill and Bogart. You go down that that lineup, and you're like, hey, this may be, they may not be as great as the Dodgers up at the top, but top to bottom, Padres lineup may be better offensively.
Finally, it seems like they're putting it together. I got to read this comment on Facebook. Kevin in North Jersey, big time baseball fan and a Lindor fan, by the way, chimes in. Q, loving this conversation with Steve Gardner. But in the end, wide margin, it's Ohtani's race to lose. Ask Steve if he knows anything about, I got to ask you if you know anything about this. WRC plus, weighted runs created plus. Look at the value, still tops the league. If you look at his combination of power and speed, Lindor's offensive numbers currently do not compare. And I'm a Mets fan and Lindor fan. I mean, does he make a case here? Does his comment? I mean, asking you if you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I like going deep into those numbers. And WRC plus is basically an offensive metric that is adjusted for ballpark and things of that nature to kind of equalize the differences between where these guys are hitting and the numbers that they're putting up. So if you play in Coors Field, your weighted runs created plus is going to be a little bit lower because the ballpark is boosting you. I'm looking at the numbers now. Ohtani's WRC plus and 100 essentially is a league average kind of thing.
Okay.
Ohtani is 166, Lindor is 136. But again, I don't think we're arguing at all about who's been better offensively this year.
You got to add
that's what that number. Yeah, that's what that number measures. But when you add the defense that Lindor has played, as many games as he's played, and been so solid on defense, that's where this thing really gets close. So I love the fact that we can actually watch players that have been this good this season and maybe a historic year from Ohtani. I think that's one of the things. If he gets to 50-50, just like Miguel Cabrera winning the Triple Crown, I think that kind of trumps everything for a lot of voters.
Agree.
And it's hard to say, oh, well, he wasn't the MVP when he did something that nobody has ever done in baseball history.
Yeah. Kevin sounds like he's a Bill James kind of guy, but I appreciate him tuning in. It does look, the AL, we know Judge is putting up historic numbers. He's running away with the AL MVP, but it is interesting because, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you're breaking down the race a little differently, right? We're not having these conversations where, well, if he's not playing, right? If he's not in the lineup, did they move him around? Do you take if Shohei Ohtani this season was not hurt, and he was pitching, he's probably not putting up these numbers.
I wonder. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to be able to do that. I mean, it when you're the only guy in Anaheim, and that's all that opponents have to worry about when you're at the plate. It's a lot more conducive to putting up big numbers when you've got Freddie Freeman hitting in the same lineup
Yeah.
and
Yep.
Mookie Betts and all those guys.
Yeah, that's a fair
So
point.
I don't know. I mean, I think certainly he's at the peak of his powers. It seems like on offense he might put up these kinds of numbers. I would not put it past him because anytime you say Shohei Ohtani can't do anything more, it seems like he in fact does.
Yeah. Let me get to a couple more.
Pretty scary what might happen next year
Yes,
when he does
that's
start
true.
pitching.
That's true. Joe D in Summers Point, Q, always loving the baseball talk. Thank you very much. We're not getting it on the local outlets in Jersey, but the thought here is Aaron Judge, Yankees. We know all about their offense. How disappointing would it be as a Yankees fan if they melt again in the postseason? I think you meant to say melt away in the postseason. I would be disappointed, but I don't believe this team. I feel as though the Yankees are going to get picked off. I do. And that's more the reason I want them to win a division. I just feel as though they're so reliant on the long ball. And just like the Phillies, if their offense struggles a little bit and they come against really good pitching, they're going to be in trouble. Now, I don't know. Again, I ask you before I let you get out of here, AL, how do you kind of handicap the postseason right now?
I think the Astros are dangerous, and the last time you and I talked, last time you and I talked, it was like, don't forget about these Astros. I also think the Yankees have been very good, and if you have Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, you have a chance no matter what. But I still think the Orioles have the ability to right the ship. And if we see the Orioles team that we saw in early July, for example, I think that's going to be a fantastic matchup in the postseason, whether they meet, in the division series or whether they meet in the ALCS, whatever the order turns out to be. I think the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Astros have shown that, they're a little bit above everybody else when they play up to their capabilities. The question is then, will they be able to do that? And will one of these other teams, as we've seen so many years, just jump up in a best of 5 series and bite a team and upset them?
That's
So
why, again, you got to win that division. And one thing too with the Yankees pitching, right? Cortez is starting to come on. I mean, you look at his numbers; he's 9-10. His ERA is 3.90, but he's won, I think, his last 4 or 5 decisions. Right? Still got Cole. We know about their other frontline starters. The Astros scare the bejeebus out of me. I want no parts of the Astros at all, at all, at all. All right, Penguin AZ. I got to get a Diamondbacks thought. He's a Diamondbacks guy.
All
You
right.
mentioned the Diamondbacks a little bit. If they get in, handicap the Diamondbacks right now, can they have the type of run that they had last season?
I think the Diamondbacks. This is still a very good team. I don't know if they can bottle up the magic that they had last year. I worry about the pitching staff being able to hold up. I mean, we have seen inconsistency from Zach Gallen, maybe more so this year than we have in previous years. Who else is going to be able to step up? Brandon Pfaadt was really, really good down the stretch and in the playoffs for them most of the time last year. I don't know that he's shown that he's back to that level. Certainly not recently. So then what? Merrill Kelly, will Jordan Montgomery be the same? I don't think the pitching wise, they can hang with the other
give up
heavyweights.
A lot of runs, man. They give up a lot of runs.
Yep. And so, the closer situation, Paul Sewald has had some issues. He's not the same pitcher he was when they picked him up at the deadline last year. So, that's another point of concern. I love Corbin Carroll and those guys there. Ketel Marte is having, what in other years would be an MVP caliber year.
Yep.
But yeah, I just don't think they have the depth in the lineup and in the pitching staff to be able to hang with the heavyweights.
Fair enough. We always appreciate the transparency. Steve Gardner at Steve A. Gardner, baseball writer, reporter, senior fantasy editor, USA Today Sports as well. Give him a follow. Fantastic follow on social as well. And of course, does a great job covering the sport of baseball, gearing up for the postseason. And of course, a voter in the MLB Hall of Fame voting process. See my guy Eli Manning on the nomination first time for the Giants, right?
How about
First
that,
time
huh?
ballot. He's eventually going to get in, but I know there are people that are not going to stick him in.
I was going to say that could be some really fun discussion if it hasn't already about his qualifications for.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, listen, I always say this, and I'll let you out on this, right? Can you tell the story? Can you tell the history of the sport without the player or players?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, then it kind of tells me,
they belong.
They deserve. Yep. They deserve to be in the hall, or at least the conversation. All right, my friend, postseason right around the corner. I know we're going to do it again. Gearing up for October baseball. Appreciate you jumping on board for a couple of moments, pal.
You got it, bud. Anytime.
All right, there you have it. Great stuff from Steve Gardner. Good comments coming in. I know we're fast approaching 4 o'clock hour, the 5 o'clock hour on the East Coast. Quickie timeout. 16 of books will reset the table. Keep it locked in on a Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass. And again, we appreciate Steve Gardner jumping on board. Got a couple tweets, got a couple more Facebook messages on baseball. Red October, the Phillies, the Yankees, the NL MVP debate. I thought for a minute we were talking to Bill James's grandson, talking about WRC plus. Listen, Ozuna is closest behind Ohtani offensively. So you got 2 weeks to go in the season. He's not catching Ohtani, right? And I get what everyone's saying about Lindor. His defense enough could win him the MVP in any other year. In any other year. Think about this, right? Go back to 2018. I pulled this up before the show. JD Martinez hit .330, which was second in all of baseball. He had 43 home runs, second in baseball. He had 130 RBIs, first in baseball. Yet, if you go back to the voting, he came in fourth in the AL. Mookie Betts got the MVP that year because he hit 32 home runs, and more importantly, his average was close to 350. The point here is that Martinez lost to Betts, who was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Arguably the best hitter in baseball. Pretty much Triple Crown winner right there. And he came in fourth because he was primarily a DH. Now, I say all that because you guys are like, wait a second, you're ruining your case for Ohtani. I say all that to say this. If you took Ohtani out of the lineup in Los Angeles, they are not winning 90 games. His numbers are absolutely ridiculous. He is a must-watch at bat. He's going to hit 50 home runs. He's driven in $110. I think he's stolen 46, 47. Imagine being a 50-50 player in that regard. And he's going to bat well over 300. Take him off this team. Where are they? Where are they? Take him off this team right now. Are the Los Angeles Dodgers a 90-win team in baseball, an 89-win team, an 88-win team? No. They're not. They're not. They're just not. 727-858-6650. Fast approaching 5 o'clock. Got to remind you, we are brought to you by our wonderful friends over in Stuart, Florida, our good folks over at Zen Auto Concept. You got to check them out online. They do a ridiculous job when it comes to detailing. If you need your car detailed, need them to go check it out, buff for anything, hey man, take them out there. They're located in Stuart, Florida. They specialize in ceramic coating, PPF. Zen Auto Concepts, a leader in high-end detailing, paint protection. And again, as I mentioned, they're located in Stuart, Florida, 727-863-8500. That's the number to get involved with those guys. They're open 6 days a week. They're closed on Sunday. You can check them out online, Zen Auto Concepts. They can also give you a quote, which is pretty cool. 772-463-850, 772-463-850. They got the blog. You can contact them and you can get that quote, go right on the website, and boom, you can enter the quote right there. Bring your car to the experts. Voted #1 detailing shop in Florida. All right, 16 to book, 60 to play with. NFL on the other side, more baseball thoughts as well. If you guys want to get in on the conversation on a Wednesday edition of The Drive, 5 o'clock. I know because we're 4 to 6 now. Sometimes the hour flies by, and I think the 4 o'clock hour is really now the 5 o'clock hour, right? So we just got to, we got to shuffle around a little bit. So NFL stuff, week 3 lines. I'll get into the Eli debate, get into the Sirianni as well, and also your thoughts, AL MVP, NL MVP, 727-858-6650. Fast approaching that 5 o'clock milestone, as we mentioned. Got to remind everyone, this is Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, part of the Coastal Sports Network. We'll come back on the other side.
Ion Tampa Bay is the latest news, weather, and traffic for Pinellas, Pasco, Ellsboro, Hernando, and surrounding communities. Stay connected on X, Facebook, and their website, iontp.com. Ion Tampa Bay keeps you informed on breaking news as it happens. Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Sports Radio 102.9, The Game, powered by Ion Tampa Bay. We'll be right back.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad. Your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute?
When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
All right, class, let's hear what everyone did this weekend. Jill?
Well, I raised my older sister to a big oak tree. It was at least 100 years old. My mom said I must have set a record or something. And then we went down by a stream and perched up on this huge rock and saw all of these little minnows swimming around way below us. And then I rescued my little brother from an evil slug king who was guarding him at the bush fortress. And my sister and I brought him back to our super twig fort for safety. And then we all laid out and told stories until it got dark. And the Big Dipper led us all the way home.
Wow. Awesome. Where were you, Jill?
Yeah. We went to the forest. It's not that far away. Anyone want to come this weekend?
Ask your parents to take you and your friends to the forest this week and find the fun, adventurous you. It's closer than you think. Check out discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Download the Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game app and tell your friends that Florida has a new leader in digital sports radio.
Bumper guy. Bumper guy. We'll take up to 6. You ever try to multitask? Well, I mean, who am I telling? Multitasking. I mean, I'm trying to type up this tweet, and I wanted to pose a question, and we'll get into it on the other side as we remind everyone to download the Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game app. Check us out online as we continue to build our block of programming out. Don't forget to always start the week off 7 to 10. Monday to Friday, Pete Shepard Show. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Martinez and Company 10 to 12. And of course, The Drive with Q. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 to 6-ish. And working on a couple different shows. I want to get into the NFL. And I'm glad I just tweeted that out. I want to get into the NFL a little bit because I'm taking a look at some of these week 3 NFL lines. And I'll get to some of your comments, and I'll get to some of your Facebook comments and your post as well. You guys can get in, as always, on the conversation, 727-858-6650. Let me see what we got here. Maddie in Delaware. on Facebook chiming in. Let me read this one because it is a long one. Q, I'm a die-hard Baltimore Ravens fan. What the hell is going on with the Ravens? I did not expect them to be 0-2. You got a veteran head coach. You got an MVP caliber player in Lamar Jackson. Not sure what's going on with the offense. The play calling is very stagnant now. If you look around the AFC North, you got Cincinnati struggling. You got Pittsburgh 2-0. Cleveland, we can't figure them out. But what's your assessment and take on the Ravens? Is there enough time to turn it around? Absolutely. 2 games in, man. Don't panic. There are teams you better panic. But I would not be overly worried about the Baltimore Ravens. I wouldn't. And I'm going to tell you why. I think eventually you opened up the season on the road against Kansas City. That's a tough spot to play in. Now, the offense only scored 20. You gave up 27. The Raiders game, the one thing that alarmed me in the Raiders game is that they ran the ball, and yet they really couldn't punch it in. Like goal line situations. The Raiders defense is a little better. The Ravens run defense did a phenomenal job. They only allowed 27 yards. They ran for $151. Jackson's going to have these days where he's going to throw that bad pick, but you've got weapons in Andrews and Flowers, and you can run the ball with Henry. Jackson can scramble. Hill can make some plays. They just need to score points. They need to punch it in. That's really it. They need to punch it in. And like a lot of teams in the NFL, you have to be able to stop teams on third down. If you can't get off the field on third down, you're going to have some problems. So, Matt, no, relax. Don't panic. I think the Ravens are going to be okay. When I look at right now, as we kind of do our weekly, kind of a new thing, we've started kind of like our Q's power rankings. And I know I don't really put too much stock in them. And I basically go top 5 teams right now in the NFL. And I weigh a lot of factors. We're talking about points dominating, points per, points against. See, I'll have the Saints at 5 because the Saints are putting up a ridiculous amount of points. Seattle and Minnesota, even though they're 2-0, I cannot stick them in the top 5 because I don't think they're a legit top 5 right now. So the Saints are definitely a top 5 squad. Tampa Bay, because of their defense, I'm going to put them at number 4. And as you can tell, the AFC will then be a little more heavier. Right now, Buffalo is 2-0, plus 27 point differential. Now, you might say to yourself, well, wait a second. You eked it by Arizona, but then they waxed a perennial playoff team in Miami, Tua, no Tua. Buffalo right now, I would say, is the number 1 team. And I would have the Texans at number 2. And then I would stick Kansas City at number 3. And then, as I mentioned, 4 and 5. So if you go down again, you've got the Saints, you've got Tampa, Saints at 5, Tampa at 4. I would stick Kansas City at 3. I would stick Houston at 2, and I would stick Buffalo at 1. Or you can flip-flop them. But basically, those are my top 5 right now, power rankings. And I know people are like, well, what's the point of doing them when you don't put them in order? Because I think they're so subjective and they change week to week. Those are the 5 top teams right now. I didn't put Pittsburgh in there because I think Pittsburgh, even though they're 2-0, they're a team that doesn't scare me offensively, even with Justin Fields. And you got a banged up Russell Wilson. Minnesota's 2-0. Everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop with Sam Darnold. And the one thing Sam Darnold is prone to do, that's turn the ball over. Trust me, he will have a run where he's turning the football over. That's an impressive win over the 49ers. Don't get me wrong, but it's not enough for me to say top 5. You want to say top 10? I have no problem doing that. I mean, I'll go back over these later in the week and I'll do it on BYP when we look at the week 3 lines. Same thing with Seattle. I look at Seattle, okay, you just squeaked by a New England team and you beat a rookie quarterback to open up the season. That does not blow me away. Penguin AC says that the Texans might be number 1. The Texans are an interesting team. Everyone's waiting for the Texans. That second, third year, you take a step back. I like Houston. I'm a big fan of CJ Stroud. By the way, did you guys see the video of Williams basically just shunning CJ Stroud? Wanted nothing to do with CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud was, they were mic'd up trying to give him some, comments, encouragement. And then you look at these bottom teams. Jacksonville, bottom team. The Rams, bottom team. The Giants, a bottom team. Carolina, a bottom team. Indianapolis, I'm really surprised that they started 0-2. Now they're laying 1 at home. Indianapolis had an opportunity to beat Green Bay. They really did. I mean, there's no Jordan Love. You go to that kid Willis. They gave up $161 on the ground. That's going to be the Colts' problem. They gave up 261 total yards, but Jacobs had $161. You cannot give up 250 yards in the NFL and expect to win a friggin' football game. You can't. You just can't. I mean, you're not going to win games like that. So some of these teams that I mentioned, again, they're going to have some issues, man. They're going to have some big-time issues as the season progresses. Hey, by the way, we mentioned the Brewers. Congrats. They just won the Central. So good for Milwaukee. They'll continue their series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Let me get to some of these baseball thoughts and then back to what's going on in the NFL as we take a look at some of these week 3 lines and a little more NFL talk. Again, 727-858-6650. What do we got here? Let's go to, no, I already said Joe. I already saw Matt. I already saw Kevin on Facebook. Sean chiming in from West Defford, South Jersey. Appreciate you listening from South Jersey, West Defford. Q, you talked a little bit about Nick Sirianni not addressing his team. I think that's a piss poor look, as you alluded to, when he doubles down with the analytics. That definitely has to piss off Jeffrey Lurie. Yeah, I think it does. I really do. I think it does. I think there are owners in the NFL that they're all about the analytics. I also think there are owners in the NFL that want their coaches to back their players, but they also want their coaches to be held accountable. And quite frankly, there are some in the NFL who have not lasted. McAdoo, Shermer, Judge, right? Because they never hold themselves accountable. And when you have a bad loss like that, man, I'm sorry. You have to. You got to address these guys. You have to. You just have to. Bobby D chiming in. Q, you got to be giddy that your guy, number 10, was officially nominated for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I know it's all about checks and balances. Still a 500 quarterback when it's all said and done. But as you alluded to, 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 MVPs, and he beat Tom Brady and Belichick, plus the stats. That alone should get him in, as you say, roller skating into the Hall of Fame. I have a feeling that when it's time for the Hall of Fame voters to assemble in their room, and you have these arguments on why you think a player should and shouldn't get in, Eli Manning is going to be a lightning rod, because people look at Eli Manning and they say he's overrated. And if you take away the last name, you take him out of New York, he's just an average quarterback. Okay. Again, this is just from someone who's pretty much watched every snap of his career. And I even watched him in college. And I thought he was a hell of a quarterback in college. Eli Manning, if you talk about winning seasons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 7-9, 6-10. Now, a couple of those years, the Giants were like 5-3, 6-2. And they always had these horrible second half starts. I don't care about Pro Bowl, fan voting. All pro is one thing. It's tough from the quarterback position, unless your name is like Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers back in the day. But statistically, he was always there. He was good for at least 4,000 plus yards, 25 plus touchdowns. Now, people will sit there and say, well, what about the interceptions? And that's all fair. Eli Manning threw, one year he had 31 touchdowns. He threw 25 picks. He led the league. I think also another year, he was also part of the MVP race. 2011, though, 30-something touchdowns, 16 picks, close to 5,000 yards passing, and he was just captain comeback. I mean, that year they were winning games they had no business winning on the road. And that's where you cut your bones, man. You beat Atlanta at home. You go on the road, you beat the 15-1 Packers, Aaron Rodgers coming off a Super Bowl. They waxed him. Then you go on the road against San Francisco where he got the snot kicked out of him. And you look at his stats. I never saw a quarterback ever get knocked down as much as Eli Manning got knocked down in that game and kept getting back up. I mean, the guy got sacked like 7 times. It was ridiculous. And he still threw for 330-something odd yards. And then outplayed Tom Brady twice. The numbers speak for themselves. And that offense, that was catered towards throwing the ball down the field. There are a lot of quarterbacks that were riverboat gamblers. There are a lot of quarterbacks that took shots and took chances down the field. But he's going to be this compelling, I guess you can say, character study, because at the end of the day, he went 117 and 117. Now, again, you have to add in the playoff run because that's where you make your money. That's where you cut your teeth. And you can make a case that he's one of the most clutch quarterbacks in NFL history when you talk about the playoffs. And the run that they made in 2011, guys, I'm telling you right now, you watch that season, you go back as a Giant fan, they had no business winning some of these games in the fourth quarter. They just didn't. They beat Philly. Arizona came from behind, right? Buffalo, they came from behind. Miami, they came from behind. They beat the Patriots on the road, clutch touchdown late. Washington late, Dallas late. I mean, it's just sometimes you got to look what the player does in the playoffs as well. And he had remarkable runs, and it was feast or famine. But 366 touchdowns, close to 60,000 yards, 117 wins, add another 2 Super Bowl rings and 2 MVPs. That to me, and never missed a game due to injury. Because stupid McAdoo wanted to bench him. Or I'm sorry, stupid Shermer wanted to bench him for Geno Smith. His streak, his Iron Man streak. You got to factor that in, man. It's all about being what? Available, accessible. When you're talking about these quarterbacks. Always. Always, always, always. Right? So we look at stats. We look at the numbers. We look at the analytics. I think sometimes you got to measure the player for the toughness, the durability. I think different sports, it's different. In baseball, I believe there's compilers. And I've used the argument, Harold Baines. Compiler. Right? I think in the NFL, if you have a certain body of work and you have a run, right, when we're looking and you're matching it with the stats and you're winning in December, January, it's a whole different ballgame. 2 Super Bowl rings, 2-time MVP. He will get in. It just probably not going to be on the first shot. It's not. And we've seen that sometimes. We've seen the bias against. We've seen the bias for and the bias against. That's the NFL. I mean, I still have people, Eagles fans, tell me Donovan McNabb's a Hall of Fame player. Donovan McNabb's not going to sniff the Hall of Fame. I'll put Randall Cunningham in the Hall of Fame before I put Donovan McNabb. I mean, honestly. I mean, Randall Cunningham, ultimate weapon, man. I mean, this guy was using his legs. You look at Gilliam, you look at Douglas back in the day, you look at Jersey Joe Gilliam, right? With the Steelers, you look at Bobby Douglas with the Bears, and then you start to look at Randall Cunningham, opens up the door for guys like who? The Michael Vicks of the world, the Cam Newtons of the world, right? That scrambling, athletic quarterback. Rodgers will be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm thinking right now, who's playing? Right? Rivers retired, Ryan retired, Big Ben retired, Brady, obviously. They're all going to get in. It would have been a cluster if all these guys retired at the same time. But I'm trying to think right now in the NFL, if we pull up the quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and I'll throw names at you, you guys tell me. Like when it's all said and done, Hall of Fame, right? Yay or nay? 727-858-6650. I'm just going to fire off a couple names for you. Matthew Stafford. You guys would probably say Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame. Yep. Matthew Stafford. Jared Goff. See, I say no. No. Lamar Jackson. Got to see more body of work. Yeah, body of work. Mahomes. Yes. Then you got Burrow. You got Herbert. Who knows? Rodgers, obviously. But point being is that crop of Rivers, Big Ben, Brady, Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins is not getting in the Hall of Fame. Kirk Cousins will get in the Hall of Fame when it comes to contracts. Yes. Yes. His agent and him belong in the Hall of Fame, the way he's just been able. The money that Kirk Cousins has made throughout the course of his career is unreal, man. It's utterly ridiculous. The contracts that this guy has. I mean, not only let me finagle Minnesota, but let me squeeze another 200 something odd million out of Atlanta. And after week 1, everyone was talking about he's not 100% healthy. And then he goes 70 yards on Monday night and he rips the heart out of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm pulling up his contract right now. If you go to Pro Football Reference, because they always give you that breakdown, career earnings. Let me see, Kirk Cousins. And I'm a Captain Kirk fan. Kirk Cousins. Where the hell's his salary? Let me pull it up. Career earnings. We'll do that. Here you go. How much do you think Kirk Cousins has made in his career?
How many years he's been in?
Kirk Cousins is what? I came in 2000 and I think it's 10 years.
Okay.
11 years? Well, hold on. Let me double check. 12 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, 13 plus years. Yeah. 2012, 2024, 24. Yeah. 13 years. 13 years.
Including Atlanta's contract.
What do you think?
$400 million?
$294 million.
Okay. Well, wait. You talk about now quarterbacks as far as the ones who've drawn a paycheck. What about the most famous one from St. Louis that was traded to the Eagles? And he collected paycheck after paycheck even after he was done with the Eagles.
St. Louis?
Yep, St. Louis Rams.
St. Louis traded from the St. Louis Rams?
Yeah.
To the Eagles?
Yepers.
What year was this?
It was, I believe, the...
Oh, you're talking about Sam Bradford.
See.
Oh, one of the most overrated friggin'. Yeah, that's... Yeah. I hated that argument, Sam Bradford. And by the way, Sam Bradford was the top overall pick. Sam Bradford was a friggin' bust, man. I don't care what anyone friggin' says.
But collected paycheck after paycheck.
Yeah, because teams were dumb enough to pay him.
Right.
At least Cousins gives you a little something. Let me see. Sam Bradford career earnings. Signed that 6-year deal for $80 million. That was 2000. So over $134 million. Think about that. Think about that money for a quarterback, mind you, that never, ever made a Pro Bowl. And I don't think even made the playoffs. And again, I don't care about the Pro Bowl, but I don't think Sam Bradford never played in the playoffs. And Sam Bradford, if you go back, Sam Bradford got pissed off when they drafted Carson Wentz. And that's when Doug Peterson had to tell him, well, if you play well, you're not going to have to look over your shoulder. I mean, Kirk Kirk Cousins, Sam Bradford. I mean, one half and the other. It's just Cousins has made a lot of money. 727-858-6650. I think Cousins is a good quarterback. I think he's a real good quarterback, to be quite honest with you. Larry in DC chiming in. Q, I can't believe your top five. It was scattered all over the place. What's the point of having a top five if you're not going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? That's a fair point. I mean, if I have to do it one more time for argument's sake, can I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Buffalo 2-0. Kansas City. Buffalo's number 1. Kansas City is number 2. Even though Kansas City's 2-0, they should have lost the other day. And then the third team is I had Houston, and then I had Tampa Bay, and then I had the Saints, and that's it. I'm not going to keep going back and forth. It's just too friggin' confusing because it's going to change on a weekly basis. Week 3 lines are out. Week 3 lines are out. Obviously, they moved a little bit. Couple things that stand out. Jets laying 6 at home to New England on Thursday Night Football. How about this? Cleveland is 6.5, 7-point favorite over the Giants. Titans, both quarterbacks stink respectively. At home, 1.5 against Green Bay. The Colts and Bears. Did anyone, I asked you guys this question. I don't know if you guys saw it, but did you see the video where Caleb Williams, CJ Stroud, was trying to give Caleb Williams words of encouragement and Caleb Williams did not want any part of it? I'm like, come on, man. Like, I'm not a fan of Williams at all. I'm not. I think I told you, I think the kid's going to be a bust. And when someone says, what are you basing that off of? I saw too many red flags in college. First of all, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass yet. He's been sacked 9 or 10 times. The offensive line is going to be another joke. But with that being said, I just didn't know if you guys saw that. Let me just continue with a couple more of these games. Eagles are 2.5-point dogs against the Saints.
That's a loss.
I mean, it's only Wednesday, but okay. Raiders 5 better than Carolina. Seattle is 4, laying 4 against the Dolphins. San Fran 7. Rams are banged up. San Francisco is banged up too.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an interesting line. Arizona coming off a big win at home, getting 3 against Detroit, coming off a really bad loss to Tampa Bay where the head coach had some head-scratching moments. That might be one of the games of the week. Tampa, you guys are drinking the juice a little too much down there in Florida, huh? Tampa's 6.5-point favorite at home against Denver. And the total is only 39. Woof. Woof. That's, oh my goodness. Wow. D, chiming in. Q, I heard your comments the other day about Bryce Young. I think you were too critical of him. I'm not going to say he's a bust just yet. There have been a lot of reclamation projects in the NFL. Just look at aforementioned Baker Mayfield. There's a difference with that. There's a big difference. If people remember, Baker Mayfield, when he kind of burst onto the scene, Baker Mayfield threw for almost 30 touchdowns his rookie season. I mean, how many? What the hell did Bryce Young do last year? I mean, can I pull up his numbers for a second? I'm not piling on the kid. Again, it's not a personal thing. Bryce Young last year, first of all, the kid was sacked 62 times. That ownership in that franchise is a joke. So I'm not blaming him 100%. He tossed 11 touchdowns, 10 picks. He was sacked 62 times. Conversely, Baker Mayfield, his rookie year, was sacked 25 times. That's apples and oranges, man. It's like Baker Mayfield won on the road and they hammered Pittsburgh. And he's won playoff games. He beat the Eagles last year. Like, so when you guys say reclamation project, I think we have to give a little more credence to it. I look at Justin Fields, right? When do we say Justin Fields is a reclamation project? because it didn't pan out
Yep.
when he was with Chicago. Obviously, it didn't pan out. That's why he's no longer with them. Here you go. Trey Lance. Right? Trey Lance. I mean, this kid was the 3rd overall pick. The 3rd overall pick. This is why I pull my hair out sometimes when we talk about these quarterbacks and drafting the quarterback. And Brandon mentioned this last week. Get a guy in the 5th round, 4th round. It's hard to do that when you think you have a winning hand on a quarterback in the top 10. But look at these guys that I just mentioned. None of them. Williams is not panning out. Richardson's banged up. They're 0-2. They've got issues. Bryce Young hasn't panned out. Trey Lance hasn't panned out. Jones hasn't panned out.
Yeah,
right? I mean, hell, Bryce Young got benched for Andy Dalton. Giants brought in Locke. Tennessee's got issues at the quarterback position. The Raiders, they're going to the friggin' porno mustache. They're going to Minshew Mania.
Phoenix still has issues.
Yeah, all these teams, man, with the quarterbacks. I guess my point is, we're trying to figure out why. Like, why are some of these young quarterbacks? Why do they struggle so much in the NFL? Right? They struggle way too much in the NFL. And I don't know if they're not being coached. They're being over-evaluated. I don't know. You'll get your diamond in the rough. You're never always going to get a Tom Brady or a Brock Purdy. There's a reason these guys are drafted top 10, top 15. But if you draft a quarterback 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember all those years Cleveland was drafting quarterbacks? It never panned out. I'm talking about 1st round draft picks for Cleveland. I'll go to the merger, the era. Here you go. So they drafted Tim Couch, didn't pan out. Brady Quinn, didn't pan out. Brandon Whedon, didn't pan out. Justin Gilbert, didn't pan out. Johnny Manziel, didn't pan out. Baker Mayfield, well, they went in a different direction. It looked like they had the quarter. Point being, is same with Washington. You just can't keep drafting, and think you're going to hit. I have so many people that will argue with me, well, you just keep drafting a quarterback until you hit. You can't do that. You're going to constantly set your franchise back. And if you don't have a steady quarterback, the Commanders, when they were then the Redskins, Jason Campbell and Kirk Cousins, I think, were the first 2 quarterbacks to start 3 or 4 straight years since Joe Theismann. I mean, think about that for a moment. Think about the list of some of these quarterbacks. I'm going to pull it up right now. Washington quarterbacks since 2000. You're going to be like, whoa. Here's some of the names for the listening audience. You tell me if these names resonate with you, if they move the needle. And we're going to go, I'll go right to 2000. Brad Johnson, Jeff George, Tony Banks, Jeff George, Shane Matthews, Patrick Ramsey, Danny Warfel, Patrick Ramsey, Tim Hasselbeck, Mark Brunell, Jason Campbell, Todd Collins, Jason Campbell, Donovan McNabb, Rex Grossman, John Beck, Kirk Cousins, Colt McCoy. Kirk Cousins played 16, 16, and 16 games, 2015, 16, and 17. Then they had Alex Smith, Josh Johnson, Mark Sanchez, right? Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, Sam Howell. Now they have Jaden Daniels. That's horrible. That's horrible. I guess you guys heard Kiki barking, 727-858-6650. What did Joey B say? What did Joey B's comment?
He did it.
Q's dog even shocked at all the money that Bradford and Cousin made. I would be too. I would be too. He made a lot. He banked a lot
That
of
was
coin.
a boatload of quarterbacks for Washington. Goodness.
That's a
gracious.
horrible list of quarterbacks. You think you're going to win? I mean, honestly.
Well, and you think about it too when it comes to Washington. I mean, you got Doug Williams, who won a Super Bowl with the Redskins and let go the following year.
So interesting when you talk about those Washington teams when they were the Redskins back in the day. Do you realize all those 3 Super Bowls, you know what they all had in common?
No fans?
No goof. They all came during strike seasons.
Interesting. Really interesting.
Yep. I feel no one ever talks about that enough.
Well, because you know why? Because a lot of people try to forget the strike seasons, the same way like baseball. I mean, that's what killed baseball, truthfully.
I mean, 1982, they played 9 games. They were 8-1, Washington.
Oh, that sounds like an arena football league.
Yeah. Wild card, beat Detroit, then they beat the Vikings, and their only loss was against Dallas in the regular season. But they turned around, and they strike shortened season, mind you. They beat Miami, right? Riggins off the side, boom, breaks free. Then you go to 1987. In 1987, the Giants were ridiculous in 1986. They were 14-2. They only lost to Seattle and Dallas. I mean, they were arguably top 5 team, top 6 of all time. The Giants were in 1980s. I mean, that 86 team was ridiculous. And then you get pinched with the strike season in 1987, and that's the argument of the players wanting to cross the picket line. And again, you only played 13, 14 games, and they crossed late. By that time, if you're a team like the Giants, you start the season off and you're losing all these games because you're playing with replacement players and you're 0-5. You can't make that up. And then you mentioned 1991. And again, same thing. 1991, same exact nonsense. What happens? You got to deal with the strike. Boom. Here we go. I think it was that was late that year, or I should say that year actually 1991, there was talk of a strike, but they still played 16 games that year. So I misspoke, 16 games. So, all right, quick timeout. I got to go and throw a bone in her. I mean, you hear her, right?
Yeah. That's nuts.
That's on another level. All right, we'll take you up to 6. Quick timeout. We'll come back on the other side.
Ion Tampa Bay is the latest news, weather, and traffic for Pinellas, Pasco, Ellsboro, Hernando, and surrounding communities. Stay connected on X, Facebook, and their website, iontb.com. Ion Tampa Bay keeps you informed on breaking news as it happens. Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Sports Radio 102.9, the game powered by Ion Tampa Bay.
To some people, the sound of a baby babbling doesn't mean much. But that's not necessarily true. By 6 months, they're combining vowels and consonants. By 9 months, they're trying out different kinds of sounds. And by 12 months, their babbling is beginning to take on some meaning. Especially if there's no babbling at all. Little to no babbling by 12 months or later is just one of the possible signs of autism in children. Early screening and intervention can make a lifetime of difference and unlock a world of possibilities. Take the first step at autismspeaks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
The following is made possible by Dad.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling all over it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
Why do you have to be careful when it's raining cats and dogs? Because you might step in a poodle.
And kids that spend more time with their dads grow up to be smarter, more successful.
Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding.
And with any luck, funnier adults.
Why didn't the skeleton go to the dance? Because he didn't have any body to go with.
Dad jokes rule. So take a moment to make a moment and give your kid a laugh. It's as easy as going to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
That's really funny.
Don't forget to get social with us. Follow Q at Rich Q on Q. And now, back to Q.
727-858-6650. Goodness, I got treats in my hand, man. That's bad when I have to I hate what I don't want to do is I try not to reward. It's not even bad behavior. It's a dog being a dog. It's a lot of energy. You know that. Half the time when I'm calling you, I'm at the park or I'm walking her or playing with her or whatever. I'm not going to try to trick her with treats. So sometimes when she barks and she's so animated that she likes to just gnaw when she gets excited. So sometimes I got to trick her. Don't gnaw my hand, gnaw one of these thousands of bones that I'm constantly getting. It's but then you go out and you order all this stuff from Chewy or you go to PetSmart and then she grabs my sock and she's content chewing on a friggin' sock for an hour. It's like, well, what the hell? Yeah, well, what the hell am I friggin', dropping $29 a friggin' bone?
Because that's what they love. They love the most obscure things.
Well, I was doing the research because I guess, the sock, the sweat, soft on their teeth, smells like you, whatever. Yeah, she was aggravated today. I don't get it. Kiki's pissed that Mark Bavaro's into Hall of Fame. He should be. Derailed. His career was derailed. Derailed by injuries. Derailed. I just think there is a lack of patience in the NFL. Do you think Bryce Young is a bust?
No. I just think he hasn't been with the right people, especially in Carolina. I mean, if you end up getting BJ Daniels as your assistant QB coach,
shameless plug, go ahead.
No, but if you're trying to if you brought him in to obviously help him because he's still young, he can mold him if needed be. But yeah, I blame it on the owner. I don't even think because Dave Canales. If Dave Canales was able to now, granted, of course, we're talking about two different people, Baker Mayfield to Bryce Young.
Yep.
But if he was able to resurrect Baker Mayfield, how in the world could you not do it on Bryce Young? Or did everybody just say, you know what, screw it. It's not going to make, you got the redheaded stepchild as your starting QB. He's not going to be there forever. And
they got the water pistol. Yeah, they got the water pistol, Andy Dalton. I haven't watched enough. I watched the kid in college. I watched a handful of Panthers games. But I think that kid, obviously, they didn't want the kid. The old regime wanted C.J. Stroud. And look,
right.
You bring in a new head coach. So now the kid's got to learn a new offensive system. They're struggling, and you start to hear the whispers. And that's the problem, right? Can't look off the receivers. Can't see over the line of scrimmage. Look, here's another thing, Angel. Bryce Young is not a big kid.
Correct.
He's not a big kid. I mean, you're talking about quarterbacks, right? So you look at Kyler Murray, and Bryce Young is 5'10". Okay, so aside from Russell Wilson and looking over the line of scrimmage, Kyler Murray is 5'10". But he's built a certain way. Bryce Young's a skinny kid. Bryce Young got screwed, drafted by an unstable organization, now onto a new staff, new coordinator, etc. Bryce Young, the perfect example of a kid that needs a change. He definitely, and that's why I brought it up yesterday. I brought it up if you were the Giants or a team like Miami. I'm sorry, Miami, pardon me. If you're Miami, would you make a move for, say, Bryce Young, a reclamation project?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point because you got to think he would do well, and you're getting it basically at a steal for that matter because he hasn't hit his original contract. So why not? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I think he could get resurrected in Miami. Anywhere else, I mean, you would have to have somebody really good on your staff to be able to do so. But why the hell not?
Yeah.
Do that.
5:44, about 20 to play with. Don't forget, it is a Wednesday edition of The Drive with Q. Rich Quinones here. Angel Martinez behind the glass, keeping us on the air. Powered by Zen Auto Concepts, high-end detailing, paint protection, auto and marine restoration, specializing in SunTech, PPF, and XPEL paint production. Ceramic Pro Graphene Coatings helps maintain your car's original finish. Every car should look so good. They are located in Stuart, Florida. Also, sponsors of The Drive, as we talk about the drive of the game.
Right.
I think it could be a potentially good landing spot because you also don't know what's going to go on with Tua. Now, they just paid Tua all that money. And I still believe Tua has a career. But see, the problem that Miami is going to face, and man, I hate to say this, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way. What's the likelihood that Tua suffers another concussion? If I were to get scale 1 to 10, 10 being very likely, what's the likelihood that he suffers another concussion if he comes back this year, or let's say comes back healthy, but then next year?
9.8.
Now you're screwed. Now you have to really step in and say, as much as I said this last week, and I went on my diatribe and my soapbox and all this other stuff when I was saying there's no way you can sit there and you can 8, okay. 8, 9, that's a high likelihood.
Yep.
That this kid is going to, the way he plays, the fact that he slides a certain way, he absorbs the contact. So point being, if you're Miami, you paid the kid. You vested in the kid. You've got interest in the kid. You care about the kid. The kid can play when he's upright and healthy. But he's going to get knocked out again. I'm not wishing it. I'm not trying to throw it in the universe. You just have to be realistic and fair. So if this kid comes back this year and God forbid gets concussed again, then everyone's going to come out of the woodwork and say it's malpractice by Miami. There's no way the doctors should have allowed this. I mean, I'm telling you, it's exactly what's going to happen. Now, he's on the IR, so we know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got your separate independent neurologists, you got the team physicians. We know all of that. But I don't know if I'm part of that Miami brass, I would never forgive myself if that kid, we gave him the green light to come back. And let's just say, 4 weeks, Angel? He's on the IR for 4 weeks,
Yep.
right? So let me pull up. So it's the injured reserve. Well, it's injured reserve designation. So, All right. Okay, here you go. Here's a couple interesting side notes. His contract has a $49.3 million insurance policy amid an injury. So the Giants have, I think, about 25 with Daniel Jones. So when they're 1-7 and they suck before Halloween and I'm still fishing, they will bench him because they don't want him to get hurt. So Tua signed a 4-year, $212 million contract.
Okay.
$167 million in injury guarantee, $43 million of which has already been paid. So break it down a little more. Miami's going to be obligated to pay out the rest of the guaranteed $124 million if Tua is not medically cleared to return to the NFL. We talked about this last week. Insurance policy can help offset that. So now Tua's contract allows Miami to purchase insurance policies worth up to $49.3 million. So that amount will apply to injuries suffered between the contract signing in July, the beginning of the Dolphins offseason workouts in 2025. They're protecting, to some extent, the kid in their investment. But what's really going to put a big a big shitstorm is if the kid is medically cleared again, okay, and he's cleared by medical staffs, and I get it, and I know where you guys are coming with this already because I see some of the comments on Facebook, and I see some of the comments on the show. If you're medically cleared, then you're medically cleared, right? And I know I can see you laughing. I'm not even going to entertain Joey B's comments right now. If you're medically cleared, you're medically cleared. If he's medically cleared and they send him out and he gets his bell rung again and concussed, everyone's going to sit there and say, well, now the Dolphins are liable. They're not, because again, he got medically cleared. And that's one of the differences. Mike, listening in Florida, chimes in. Q, I'm a big time Tua fan. I'm a diehard Dolphins fan. But the bottom line is this kid needs to retire. I listened to your show the other day. You were very passionate in speaking about the athletes and players. You used the analogy to a boxer, and I can appreciate that, you being in the fight game as long as you have. But I don't care about the money aside. It doesn't matter at this point. This kid's going to get seriously hurt. If not concussed, he's going to get permanent brain damage. There's absolutely no way he should even be wearing a Miami Dolphins uniform right now. I mean, again, though, I'm not condoning the Dolphins. I'm not sitting here saying in one breath he should play. It's his right. What I said last week is it's his right to decide. That's what I was saying. It's his right to decide if he wants to continue to play. And again, you know, it's who am I? Who are you? Who is anyone to say that, right? Anything different? That's all I'm saying.
All right. Since
I just, you got to be realistic though, Angel. If he goes out there again and gets hurt, you know, this is why you take out those types of insurance policies.
Right. No, you're right. I'm going to bring up 2 points. One, because we're kind of talking medical here. But one was, I agree with what you even mentioned yesterday as far as the tool. If I'm the doctor, I am not putting my signature on there because God forbid, like you said yesterday, he comes back, gets hurt again. That's your reputation, number one. The other thing on a kind of a side note to stuff that we're talking about, you know that what happened with 23andMe? So how about this one? All of 23andMe's independent board members resign over disagreements with CEO. So the only one that's left is the CEO. Everybody else resigned. That's big.
That came out of left field.
Sure did. Well, that's because you sold yourself to el gobierno.
What's that, the DNA testing?
Yeah. When, you know, it was supposed to be private, you know, you find out.
How'd you go from Tua to DNA testing?
Well, because that's what I'm saying. It was like halfway medical related.
Apples and oranges, man.
Okay. But no, but to the other point, listen, he's got to, there comes a point in time that it's got to stop. As far as like, if you know that you're going to take that one last hit and it's going to be lights out for you, that's not fair to your family. It's not fair to kids. My opinion, and my opinion probably doesn't mean anything to anybody. But to me is, if you have kids, you want to see your kids grow up. You know, you don't want to be in that chair forever, you know, or anything else, from laying in bed forever, whatever, having major concussions, you know, migraines, all the effects that come along with it. You got to end up walking away. And the other thing too, because I know we're coming up on it as well, but did you happen to catch some of Aaron Hernandez last night?
No, I have no desire to watch that. It looks stupid, and I don't know how they're. I just think that whole situation. I mean, no. Honestly, I'm being very transparent. I just, it's almost like cringeworthy. I mean, is it worth? You're talking about the Netflix special or the
the one from Hulu?
Nope. Negative. Hard pass. Why? Did you watch it?
We started watching. I had a DVR the rest of it because then ended up being, well, it came on around 10 something, whatever it was, but then it repeated back at 11 and midnight. So I haven't seen all of it, but I will say the dad was out there.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I get you make these docs and you make these shows and all this other stuff and profiting off this, profiting off that, but his whole story is just
Screwed
it's
up.
beyond. It's you knew the kid was a friggin' loose cannon and head case in college, right?
Yep.
I mean, there were so many red flags, and now all of a sudden, you got to go back and you got to see how the media is going to render, the brain injury and CTE and I guess they mentioned his scans confirmed he had CTE.
Mm-hmm.
After and again, the only way you can figure out if someone has CTE is after they pass.
Right.
So it's like I can't. Everyone's saying Antonio Brown's got. Nobody knows. He's still living, right? If the day were to come where he passes, then yeah, then you can find out. I know the Washington Post had a story a couple years ago that Aaron Hernandez suffered from the most severe CTE ever found in a person his age. Okay, but I can also go back and, if memory serves me correct, now I don't know how old was Aaron Hernandez.
How was he? In his 30s? Not even that. No, 20 something, 27, 28-ish.
When he died, when he committed suicide?
I believe so.
He was 27. Okay. Yeah, he was fairly young. Andre Waters had a, his CTE. I mean, if you go back and he committed suicide back in 2006. So they basically said that he developed CTE and his CTE degenerated into that of an 80-year-old man with Alzheimer's.
That's crazy.
Caused by the number of concussions he sustained during his football career. See, that's all jokes aside. There's the rub with Tua, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why, after they pass for CTE test, I would believe the medical tech, especially these days, is beyond that, because I think they actually have to go and autopsy your brain. To be honest,
yep. There's the marks or whatever it is when once they take it out, they start seeing the differences.
Post-mortem neuropathological analysis.
News
right now, there's I pulled it right up. Yep. Can only be diagnosed after death. That may soon change because, again, they're volunteering teams for groundbreaking research, yada, yada, yada. By the way, the average lifespan of a person with CTE, 17 to 98 years old. But imagine if you have CTE and you have the brain of an 80-year-old, or you're showing symptoms of Alzheimer's,
mm-hmm.
and you have no freaking clue where the hell you're at. You forget to brush your teeth, to shower, to go to bathroom, to eat. You're not. I mean, Andre Waters. I mean, think about that for a moment. Think about Tua. Like, if you're Tua and you're having this discussion with your family and your friends, and the Dolphins brass. I mean, I'm wondering if the Dolphins are like, hey, man, it's a business at the end of the day, but they also cut that check. They paid him. And it's unfortunate that, a week plus into the season, the kid gets concussed. Because a couple weeks ago, we were debating, should they pay him? Should he sit out? Should he skip mandatories, OTAs, training camp, sit preseason? Are the Dolphins going to pay him? Here's the pro, here's the con. Let's make the argument, right? We went through his body of work, what he's been able to do. I said, pay him. You got a franchise quarterback. I understand the health issues and the concussion. And then boom, he turns around and he gets concussed. I mean, it's unfortunate, man. It really is. What's scary about the Tua concussions, he shakes and almost goes into convulsions, and the hits are that hard or cheap shots. When your hand is up like that, it's almost like a boxer getting knocked out, right? It's not about what the equilibrium. When the hand's up like that and that prolonged, you're done. you're out cold, man, before you even hit the ground. That hit the other day, DeMar Hamlin made a football play.
Right.
It's just the way Tua collided, or I'm not going to say absorb, but delivered the contact, right? Hamlin absorbed it, but it's the way Tua, and that's why Carl Banks, great linebacker, does the Giant games on FAN, made the comment, teach these guys how to slide. Nowadays, remember now, as soon as you're down, done. Can't touch them.
Correct.
But slide the right way. Get down. Live to fight another day. But it's so hard, man. When you're a competitor and you're an athlete and you're running 90 miles an hour, your mind is probably not thinking that way. You're thinking it's a collision. I want to pick up extra yardage. Right? There's some running back. Walter Payton, fight for the extra yard. Never wanted to get out of bounds. And again, you get hit. You get hurt. You got to deal with concussions, right? I mean, I know what you guys are saying, but that in that instant, again, that was not it's not like when you watch back in the day in the 60s and 70s on X, there's a great account, and I know we got to wrap it up, that has all the old school hits. The way they were tackling people, Atkinson, Tatum, Lambert, Ham, Mean Joe Green, they were clotheslining dudes. They were driving their head. The rules have changed right now. They're implemented to safeguard the player, the certain different helmets. But then I also go back to the argument, well, then why did you stretch the season to 17 games? Because ultimately it's a money grab for the NFL. There's going to be a time where there's going to be no preseason. The NFL will be 20 games. We will go right into March. As long as they make money, as long as they profit, as long as Roger Goodell makes the owners money, that's all they give a shit about. That's all they care about. That's it.
But real quick before we wrap it up here.
Yeah.
You think how now the NFL said the guys can wear, how when they're in practice or in preseason, they wear that extra cushion pad on the outside. Now, of course, some of the players are starting to wear it, and they have, of course, the team logo on it. It's different from what you see during practice and preseason. Do you believe that will make possibly maybe a small smidge of a difference of not wearing it?
I can't answer. It's a great question. I have I'd have to really, I know there are so many different helmets that are developed. I just think the game is so violent. Collisions are bound to happen. Guys are going to get concussed. I just think this is a very rare case, of a young quarterback that's just been concussed entirely too much early on in his career. I just, like I said, man, you watch some of these highlights. I mean, Joey Beeman, Burt's hit on Montana in 86. Leonard Marshall almost killed him in 90. I mean, it's just, and your head's crashing down on the canvas, right? Your head's crashing down on the turf, the hard turf. That's why they wanted to go to grass, natural field, a little more soften the cushion, soften the blow. It's tough, man. Tua and the Dolphins are going to have some questions that are going to be answered in a couple of weeks. So, all right, I know we got to start wrapping it up. Hey, don't forget, we are brought to you by our good friends over at Zen Auto Concepts, Stewart, Florida, Played Against Sports, Acorn to Oak, and of course, fresh roasted coffee. Appreciate Steve Gardner from USA Today jumping on board. Angel Martinez behind the glass producer show, keeping us on the air. We're not sure if we're traveling Friday, so we might do a short version on Thursday. Angel and I got to work out the logistics, and then that'll technically be your Friday show. We're not sure just yet. We will figure something out, but if you follow us on social media, we'll give you some updates. Great stuff with the comments, great stuff with the texts, and always appreciate you guys jumping on board. You guys are fantastic. I love the baseball, the football talk when you guys engage at 727-858-6650. We always appreciate you guys keeping us locked in for 2 hours. Don't forget Pete Shepard tomorrow, 7 to 10. Martinez and Company Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 12. The Drive with Q from 4 to 6. Mi hermano, do you have anything to say before we get out of here? Oh, no, he's on the phone. Okay, he's checking out the phone. He's doing his thing. He's giving me a thumbs up. Okay, the incredible shrinking hermano. Circle gets a square. With that, we will either talk to you tomorrow, potentially talk to you Friday, but we will definitely cram in a shortened edition of The Drive with Q right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. As always, enjoy your Sports Wednesday. Appreciate the comments, the engagement. Be safe, be sound. Hasta luego, buen día.